In the heart of Tokyo Dome, an 5-year-old legend sat quietly among roaring fans. A celebratory martial arts exhibition turned volatile when Riku, the Blade Tanaka, undefeated, arrogant, and live-streaming, called out Chuck Norris with a sneer. "You're just an old grandpa." Chuck Norris wasn't your typical guest of honor. For over 5 decades, he was a martial arts champion, military veteran, and the force behind a global fighting legacy, known for defeating world-class opponents with surgical precision. When Riku strutted across the platform, mocking a lifetime of mastery, he had no idea he was about to face a man who had made silence more dangerous than speed. Chuck rose, and with one measured step, changed the tone of the entire arena. His calm dismantling of the cocky black belt would echo far beyond the mat. What began as youthful mockery became a global masterclass. The Tokyo Dome would never be the same after Chuck Norris reminded the world what respect truly looks like. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Tokyo Dome hummed with anticipation. Thousands of spectators filled the stadium seats, their collective energy charging the air with electricity. Banners adorned the walls, showcasing icons of martial arts past and present. Camera crews jostled for position around the elevated fighting platform at the center, where spotlights cut through manufactured fog, painting dramatic shadows across the mat. Ladies and gentlemen, Aya Nakamura's voice resonated through the arena. "Welcome to the International Martial Arts Exhibition." Her words carried the practiced polish of a professional announcer, yet retained the reverence of someone who truly understood what they were witnessing. Tonight, we celebrate not just the physical prowess of our fighters, but the spirit and philosophy that has guided martial arts for centuries. From her position at the commentator's desk, Aya's eyes drifted toward the VIP section. There, seated quietly among celebrities and dignitaries, was a figure whose presence seemed to anchor the entire event: Chuck Norris. At 85, his face carried the lines of a life lived with purpose. He wore no flashy clothes, no championship belt, just a simple dark jacket over a collared shirt. His hands rested easily on his knees as he observed the proceedings with attentive eyes that had seen countless fights across decades. Unlike the social media stars and action heroes who posed for selfies nearby, Chuck had entered without fanfare. No music had announced his arrival. No spotlights had sought him out. He simply appeared, nodded respectfully to those who recognized him, and took his seat. Yet his presence was unmistakable, a gravitational pull that drew discreet glances from fighters and fans alike. And now, Aya continued, "Please welcome our featured exhibition fighter, the undefeated sensation, the man who's dominated 3 weight classes across 2 continents, Riku, the Blade Tanaka." The lights dimmed. Bass-heavy music exploded through the speakers. Laser lights swept across the crowd as smoke machines created a dramatic fog around the entrance tunnel. The audience rose to their feet, phones lifted high to capture what came next. Riku Tanaka emerged like a rock star, taking the stage. Draped in a silk robe emblazoned with his logo, he strutted down the aisle, flanked by an entourage of training partners and Kenta, his hype man, who live-streamed every moment while shouting commentary into his phone. "The Blade is in the building," Kenta yelled over the music. "6-time champion! 32 knockouts! 0 defeats! Drop a fire emoji if you're watching the GOAT right now!" Riku soaked in the adoration, pointing to fans, flexing for cameras, playing his role to perfection. At 28, he embodied a new generation of martial artists, ones who understood that fighting was only half the job. The other half was performance. His face was handsome but hard, with eyes that burned with intensity and a mouth that seemed perpetually caught between a sneer and a smile. Riku's popularity is undeniable. Aya observed into her microphone, her tone professional but reserved. His speed and precision have earned him a record-breaking winning streak, though some veterans have questioned his adherence to traditional martial arts values. Near the fighting platform, an older man watched Riku's entrance with stoic assessment. Tetsuo Iron Palm Mori stood with the straight-backed posture of someone who'd spent decades perfecting his form. As the exhibition's head referee and a former champion himself, Tetsuo represented the bridge between martial arts past and present. His eyes narrowed slightly at Riku's theatrics, then drifted toward Chuck Norris. The two men exchanged a subtle nod, a gesture containing decades of shared understanding. They had fought on the same cards in the 1970s, had taught seminars together, had watched martial arts evolve from niche discipline to global entertainment. No words were needed between them. Approaching the platform now is Riku's opponent for tonight's exhibition match, Aya announced. Veteran fighter Hiroto Sato, three-time All-Japan Karate champion. Hiroto entered without music or entourage. Just a humble bow to the audience and a respectful nod toward the judges. At 42, he moved with the fluid economy of a lifelong practitioner. Where Riku projected flash, Hiroto emanated substance. As both fighters took their positions, Tetsuo called them to the center. Hiroto bowed deeply. Riku gave the barest tilt of his head, already bouncing on his toes, hungry for action. "Remember," Tetsuo said, his voice carrying the weight of tradition, "this is an exhibition match. We demonstrate skill, control, and respect." Riku nodded impatiently while Kenta shouted from outside the platform, "Show them who's boss, Blade. Old school's about to get schooled." The bell rang. Hiroto settled into a traditional stance, centered and balanced. Riku, however, exploded forward immediately, a blur of motion and aggression. His first combination came so fast that Hiroto barely had time to block, forcing the older fighter to retreat a step. "Incredible speed from Tanaka," Aya commented. "He's applying pressure right from the start." The crowd roared as Riku pressed his advantage, forcing Hiroto to continually defend. Each strike came with technical precision, but also theatrical flair. Spinning kicks that looked spectacular and landed with punishing force. Hiroto countered when he could, landing a few solid blows that Riku seemed to absorb without concern. Midway through the round, Riku slipped past Hiroto's guard and connected with a sharp jab to the face. As Hiroto stumbled slightly, Riku smiled. "Getting tired already, old man," he said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. Hiroto regained his composure and returned to his stance, saying nothing. The fighters circled again, but now something had shifted. What had begun as an exhibition was transforming into something more personal. In the VIP section, Chuck Norris watched with unwavering attention. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes tracked every movement, every stance, every choice both fighters made. Riku continued his offensive barrage, moving with remarkable speed for his size. He feinted left, then launched a lightning-fast roundhouse kick that caught Hiroto on the side. The veteran fighter attempted to counter with a sweep, but Riku evaded it easily. "Too slow," Riku taunted, loud enough for nearby spectators to hear. "This ain't the 1990s anymore." The comment drew mixed reactions. Younger fans cheered while older practitioners exchanged uncomfortable glances. Hiroto said nothing, maintaining his focus despite the provocation. The round continued with Riku dictating the pace. His movements weren't just effective, they were deliberately showy, designed to elicit gasps and applause. When he landed a particularly acrobatic spinning kick, he glanced toward the cameras, making sure they caught his moment of glory. As the round neared its end, Hiroto saw an opening and struck with a traditional counterattack. His fist connected solidly with Riku's midsection, a clean hit that would have scored highly in any traditional tournament. For a flash, surprise registered on Riku's face. Then it hardened into something darker. The next sequence happened so fast that many in the audience weren't sure what they saw. Riku launched a combination that seemed excessive for an exhibition, a punishing series of strikes culminating in a brutal uppercut that caught Hiroto squarely on the chin. The veteran fighter collapsed immediately, legs buckling beneath him as he hit the mat with a sickening thud. The crowd gasped. Tetsuo rushed forward, signaling for the medics. Hiroto lay motionless for several seconds before his eyes fluttered open, disoriented and dazed. "That's how we do it now," Riku shouted, arms raised in victory as he paraded around the fallen fighter. The bell rang frantically, officially ending the match. But Riku was already playing to the crowd, climbing the ropes to flex for his fans. Medics swarmed the platform, attending to Hiroto with neck braces and careful movements. The atmosphere in the arena had shifted. Excitement mingled with discomfort as spectators processed what they'd witnessed. A decisive victory for Tanaka, Aya said into her microphone, her professional tone strained, though perhaps with more force than is customary in an exhibition match. While fans shouted and cameras flashed, Chuck Norris remained perfectly still in his seat. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had a sharpened focus, like a man measuring the distance to a target. Riku, still riding the high of victory, grabbed a microphone from one of the event staff. His chest heaved with exertion, sweat glistening on his face as he addressed the crowd. "That's what a real fighter looks like," he proclaimed, his voice echoing through the arena. His eyes scanned the audience as he soaked in their reaction. Many cheered wildly, while others watched in uncomfortable silence. Then his gaze locked onto the VIP section, on Chuck Norris. A new smile spread across Riku's face, one that contained calculation beneath its confidence. He turned to make sure the cameras followed his line of sight. "Hey, I see we've got some legends in the house tonight," he said, pointing directly at Chuck. "The great Chuck Norris himself. Man, I used to watch your movies when I was a kid." His tone carried the faintest edge of mockery. "Before I knew what real fighting looked like." The comment sent a ripple through the crowd. Some younger fans laughed. Others murmured in disapproval. In the commentator's booth, Aya's eyes widened. Riku seems to be addressing Chuck Norris directly, which is an unexpected development in tonight's program. Chuck's expression remained impassive. He made no move to respond, no indication that the words had registered at all. But Tetsuo, still checking on the injured Hiroto, looked up sharply, his brow furrowing at the brewing disrespect. Kenta, sensing viral content in the making, rushed to the edge of the platform with his phone streaming live. "Yo, Blade's calling out Chuck Norris. This is history happening right now. Smash that follow button." The atmosphere in the Tokyo Dome crackled with tension. What had begun as a celebration of martial arts was teetering on the edge of something else entirely. A collision between two eras, two philosophies, two definitions of what it meant to be a warrior. And as the medics helped Hiroto from the platform, as Riku continued to bask in his victory, as thousands of spectators held their collective breath, Chuck Norris watched, silent, still, waiting. The Tokyo Dome's atmosphere shifted like weather before a storm. Hiroto Sato had just been helped out of the arena, his trainer supporting him as medical staff followed closely behind. The exhibition match had ended, but Riku Tanaka still commanded the platform, microphone in hand, sweat glistening on his triumphant face. "That's modern fighting for you," Riku continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the stadium. "No disrespect to the legends, but the game's evolved." His eyes remained fixed on Chuck Norris, who sat motionless in the VIP section. In the commentary booth, Aya Nakamura struggled to maintain her professional composure. "This is certainly an unscheduled deviation from tonight's program," she said, her voice tight. Riku Tanaka appears to be directly addressing martial arts icon Chuck Norris. Camera operators swung their lenses between Riku and Chuck, capturing the brewing confrontation from every angle. The audience's reactions split visibly. Younger fans cheered Riku on while older spectators exchanged concerned glances. Kenta positioned himself strategically below the platform, his phone streaming every moment. The blade is calling out the legend himself. This is crazy. Who thinks Chuck should answer the call? Drop some fire emojis. Riku paced the platform like a predator, feeding off the energy. You know, I grew up watching your movies, Mr. Norris. All those spinning kicks and roundhouses. He demonstrated with a flashy, exaggerated kick that drew cheers from his supporters. Looked good on camera, but we all know Hollywood's not the real thing, right? The comment hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some laughed nervously. Others sat in uncomfortable silence. Chuck remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged. Decades of discipline had taught him something Riku had yet to learn. True power never rushed to prove itself. Tetsuo Mori moved to the edge of the platform, his weathered face stern as he gestured for Riku to wrap it up. But Riku either didn't notice or chose to ignore the veteran referee. I mean, respect to you for what you did back in the day, Riku continued, his tone carrying the condescension of false deference. But martial arts has come a long way since then. We're faster, stronger, more technical. He gestured to the path where Hiroto had been carried out. That's why the old school can't hang with the new. In the VIP section, several dignitaries and celebrities shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A martial arts film star leaned over to whisper something to his neighbor, eyes darting between Chuck and Riku. Aya's knuckles had turned white around her microphone. Though she maintained her professional demeanor, her voice carried an edge when she spoke. As a reminder to our audience, Chuck Norris is not only a film star, but a legitimate martial arts champion with numerous titles to his name. His contributions to karate and other disciplines are well documented and respected worldwide. This historical correction seemed to amuse Riku further. He smiled directly into the nearest camera. Sure. Much respect for the history books. But records are made to be broken. Legends are meant to be surpassed. He pointed at himself with his thumb. That's why I'm here. Kenta had positioned himself for the perfect streaming angle. Yo, the blade is speaking facts. Old school versus new school. Who you got? Comment below. Tetsuo finally stepped onto the platform, his patience visibly exhausted. He approached Riku and spoke in a low voice that the microphones couldn't catch. Whatever he said, Riku responded with a dismissive shrug. Just having some fun, old man, Riku said, loud enough for nearby spectators to hear. It's entertainment, right? That's what people pay for. Tetsuo's expression darkened, but before he could respond, Riku turned back to the audience, amplifying his performance. You know what? I've got an idea. His voice rose with theatrical excitement. Since we're celebrating martial arts tonight, why don't we give the people what they really want to see? He pointed directly at Chuck Norris again. How about it, Mr. Legend? Care to step in here and show us if those movie moves work in real life? The stadium erupted. Shock, excitement, and disbelief cascaded through the crowd in waves. Phones lifted higher as everyone tried to capture the moment. Security personnel near the VIP section exchanged uncertain glances, unsure how to handle the unexpected challenge. Is he serious? Aya's professional mask slipped momentarily, genuine disbelief coloring her words. She quickly composed herself. I should remind everyone that Mr. Norris is 85 years old and here as an honored guest, not a participant. Riku seemed to anticipate this objection. Age is just a number, right? Isn't that what all the motivational posters say? His grin widened. And I'll take it easy, promise. Just a friendly exhibition. No contact if he's worried. The last comment dripped with condescension. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Chuck Norris remained unmoved, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around him. Not a muscle in his face twitched at the provocation. His hands rested easily on his knees. His posture relaxed, yet dignified. Kenta zoomed his camera in on Chuck's impassive face. The legend looks scared, y'all. Can't blame him. The blade just sent a dude to the hospital. That comment seemed to touch a nerve throughout the arena. A ripple of disapproval moved through sections of the crowd. Even some of Riku's young fans exchanged uncomfortable glances. Tetsuo stepped forward again, reaching for the microphone. But Riku sidestepped him with the agility that had made him champion. "Come on, Chuck," Riku continued, dropping the formal address. "One round, you and me. For the fans." He spread his arms wide. Unless all those movies were just movies. The last word hung in the air like a slap. Throughout the arena, a new tension took hold. This had crossed beyond promotion into disrespect, beyond challenge into mockery. In the commentary booth, Aya's professional restraint finally broke. "This is completely inappropriate," she said, forgetting momentarily that her microphone was live. "Chuck Norris deserves better than this circus." Her comment resonated with many in the audience. Scattered applause broke out in support of her sentiment. The atmosphere in the Tokyo Dome had become charged with conflicting energies: excitement, discomfort, anticipation, and beneath it all, a growing current of indignation on behalf of a legend being taunted. Then, something changed. It began as a rhythmic chant from a small section near the front. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" The chant spread outward like ripples in water, gathering strength as it moved through the crowd. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" Riku noticed the shift, but rather than looking concerned, his grin widened. This was exactly what he wanted. Controversy, attention, viral moments. He encouraged it, pumping his fist to the rhythm of Chuck's name while mouthing "come on" toward the VIP section. Kenta swiveled his camera between the chanting crowd and Chuck. "This is insane. The whole arena is calling for the legend. Will he answer or stay in his seat? Drop your predictions now." Throughout it all, Chuck Norris remained still. His face betrayed nothing. No anger, no offense, no eagerness to prove himself. Just calm observation. He had spent decades mastering control of his body, his emotions, his energy. This moment was merely another test of that mastery. In the commentary booth, Aya watched with growing concern. "While this certainly makes for dramatic television, I think we should remember that tonight was supposed to be about honoring martial arts traditions, including respect for." She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening. Chuck Norris had moved. It was a simple motion. He uncrossed his legs and placed both feet flat on the floor. Nothing more. Yet somehow this minimal adjustment commanded the attention of the entire arena. The chanting faltered as thousands of spectators held their breath. Riku noticed the shift in the crowd's energy and turned to see what had caused it. When he spotted Chuck's subtle movement, he doubled down on his performance. "Is the legend considering it?" he called out, playing to the cameras. "Come on, Chuck. One round. Show us what you've got." The chanting resumed, louder now. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" Chuck Norris stood up. The simple action silenced the arena instantly. He rose without hurry or theatrics. Just the fluid, controlled movement of a man who had spent his life perfecting the mechanics of his body. At 85, he moved with a grace that defied his years, straightening to his full height with quiet dignity. He wore no flashy clothing, no branded gear, just a simple dark jacket over a button-up shirt and slacks. He made no gesture toward the crowd, sought no validation from the cameras. His eyes remained fixed on Riku, his expression still unreadable. The Tokyo Dome held its collective breath. Riku, for the first time, showed a flicker of uncertainty. He had expected refusal, Perhaps an awkward wave-off that he could mock later on social media. He hadn't anticipated this silent acceptance. But he recovered quickly, his performer's instinct taking over. "Look at that! The legend is on his feet," he shouted into the microphone. "Chuck Norris is considering stepping into the modern era." The crowd's reaction transformed into something more complex than simple excitement. There was reverence mixed with the anticipation now. A growing sense that they were witnessing something significant. Tetsuo watched Chuck with knowing eyes. He had seen that expression before, decades ago, when opponents mistook Chuck's calm for weakness. It was the look of a man who didn't fight for show, who didn't strike out of anger or pride, but who, when necessary, fought with absolute clarity of purpose. Chuck took one step forward, then another. His movement toward the platform was unhurried, yet deliberate, each step carrying the weight of intention. Kenta's live-stream commentary became increasingly frantic. "Oh my God! He's actually coming! Chuck Norris is walking to the platform. This is not a drill. Share this stream right now." Security personnel looked to the event organizers for direction, receiving only confused shrugs in return. No one had planned for this scenario. In the commentary booth, Aya found herself speechless for perhaps the first time in her professional career. When she finally spoke, her voice was hushed with reverence. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears that Chuck Norris is responding to Riku Tanaka's challenge." As Chuck approached the platform steps, Tetsuo moved to meet him. The two old friends exchanged a look that contained volumes. Concern from Tetsuo, quiet resolve from Chuck. Tetsuo placed a hand on Chuck's shoulder and leaned in to speak privately. "You don't need to do this," he said softly. "No one would think less of you." Chuck's response was equally quiet. "It's not about me, Tetsuo. It's about what we both spent our lives teaching." Understanding passed between them. Tetsuo nodded once and stepped aside. Riku watched this exchange from the platform, his expression caught between excitement and dawning uncertainty. The reality of what he had instigated was beginning to sink in. He covered any nervousness with bravado, playing to his audience. "The legend actually accepted the challenge," he announced, his voice carrying a hint of forced laughter. "Give it up for Chuck Norris, people. Taking us back to the 1970s. But his words seemed hollow now, drowned out by the reverent silence that had fallen over the arena. As Chuck climbed the steps to the platform with measured dignity, even Riku's most devoted fans watched in hushed anticipation. Chuck stepped onto the fighting surface. He removed his jacket slowly, methodically folding it before handing it to Tetsuo. Beneath it, he wore a simple black t-shirt that revealed arms still defined by muscle, thinner than in his prime, perhaps, but marked by the kind of functional strength that comes from decades of disciplined practice rather than showy gym workouts. He stood opposite Riku, making no stance, initiating no formal preparation. He simply waited, his presence filling the space between them with unspoken gravity. For the first time, Riku seemed at a loss. The script he had been following, the cocky challenger calling out the has-been, suddenly felt wrong, the narrative shifting beneath his feet. He looked at the man standing before him. Not a washed-up movie star, but a living embodiment of martial arts history. Then, remembering the cameras, his audience, his brand, Riku forced his smirk back into place. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying less conviction than before. "Didn't think you'd actually do it, old man." He glanced at the crowd, seeking validation. "Guess we're really doing this, huh? The past versus the future." Chuck said nothing. His silence seemed to fill the arena more completely than Riku's amplified voice. Tetsuo stepped between them, his weathered face solemn. He looked from Riku to Chuck, then back again. After a moment's consideration, he gave a single, grave nod. "If this exhibition is to proceed," he said, his voice carrying the weight of tradition. "It will be conducted with honor and respect." He fixed Riku with a pointed stare. "Is that understood?" Riku nodded, some of his bravado faltering under Tetsuo's intensity. "Very well." Tetsuo stepped back, his role shifting from referee to witness. The Tokyo Dome had fallen so silent that the sound of the air conditioning could be heard humming through the vast space. Thousands of spectators leaned forward in their seats, every camera focused on the platform. In the commentary booth, Aya watched with her hand over her microphone, her professional distance momentarily forgotten. No bell rang. No formal announcement was made. But as Chuck Norris and Riku Tanaka faced each other on the fighting platform, everyone present understood that they were about to witness something more significant than a simple exhibition match. They were about to see a collision between two eras, two philosophies, a reckoning between those who fought for attention and those who had earned respect through silence. The silence in the Tokyo Dome crystallized into something almost tangible. Chuck Norris stood motionless at one end of the platform, his posture relaxed, yet poised. Opposite him, Riku Tanaka bounced lightly on his toes, rolling his shoulders, putting on a show of loosening up. No referee stepped forward to officially start the match. No bell rang. The usual formalities of combat sports had been suspended, replaced by something more primal. Two men, one space, and the weight of thousands of watching eyes. "I'll take it easy on you," Riku called out, just loud enough for the front rows to hear. His voice carried a nervous edge beneath its bravado. "Just try to keep up, okay?" Chuck's expression remained unchanged. He made no response, offered no stance, showed no preparation. His hands hung loosely at his sides. Riku's eyes narrowed slightly. The legend's calmness was unnerving him. He had expected fear, perhaps anger, or at least some visible preparation. But Chuck stood, as if waiting for a bus, not a fight. Kenta's livestream continued from ringside. "The Blade's about to teach the old school what modern fighting looks like. Watch history get made right now." After another moment of hesitation, Riku decided to take control of the situation. With no formal signal to begin, he launched himself forward, closing the distance with explosive speed. His first combination came fast and technical. A jab cross followed by a slashing roundhouse kick aimed at Chuck's midsection. The moves were executed with textbook precision, the kind that had won him championships and sponsorships. But they hit nothing but air. Chuck had shifted position, a minimal, efficient movement that left him just beyond Riku's reach. No wasted motion, no dramatic evasion. He simply wasn't where Riku's strikes had been aimed. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Riku recovered quickly, resetting his position before launching another attack. This time a blinding sequence of punches designed to overwhelm with speed. Again, Chuck moved. Not retreating, not countering. Just subtle shifts of weight and position that caused each of Riku's strikes to fall short by mere inches. In the commentary booth, Aya Nakamura leaned forward, her professional detachment momentarily forgotten. "Remarkable," she whispered into her microphone. "Chuck Norris is demonstrating the principle of no-touch defense, using minimal movement and perfect timing to neutralize attacks before they can land." Riku's face hardened. He pressed forward again, this time with a more diverse attack pattern. High, low, kicks mixed with punches, feints meant to draw out a counter. His movements were spectacular, the kind that looked impressive on highlight reels and social media compilations. Yet Chuck remained untouched. His economy of movement made Riku's attacks look increasingly theatrical by contrast. Where Riku spun and leapt, Chuck simply pivoted and stepped. Where Riku expended energy, Chuck conserved it. "Come on," Riku growled, frustration bleeding into his voice. "Fight back." Chuck said nothing. His breathing remained measured, his expression calm. He continued to evade with minimal movement, making no attempt to counter. From the edge of the platform, Tetsuo watched with knowing eyes. He recognized what was happening. Not a refusal to engage, but a lesson being taught through action rather than words. Riku launched a spinning back kick with enough force to knock out an ordinary opponent. Chuck sidestepped it with such precision that Riku's momentum carried him stumbling forward. For a brief moment, the young fighter's back was exposed, a perfect opportunity for a devastating counter. Chuck didn't take it. The crowd noticed. A collective intake of breath signaled their recognition of the opening Chuck had allowed to pass. This wasn't a man who couldn't fight back. This was a man choosing not to. Riku sensed it too. His face flushed with a mixture of frustration and embarrassment. He reset his position, visibly trying to calm himself, but the damage to his composure was done. "Stop dancing and fight!" he shouted, abandoning any pretense of casual confidence. In the VIP section, the martial arts film star who had watched earlier leaned over to his neighbor. "Chuck's using Heiken Ashi," he said quietly. "The empty step," making his opponent defeat himself. Kenta's live-stream commentary became increasingly frantic, the blades giving the legend a master class. But the old man keeps running. "Stand and fight, Chuck." Yet the nervous edge in his voice betrayed uncertainty about what he was witnessing. Riku adjusted his strategy. He cut off the platform with lateral movement, trying to trap Chuck against the ropes. When he thought he had him cornered, he unleashed another barrage. A lightning-fast combination of jabs, hooks, and a crushing knee aimed at the midsection. Chuck didn't retreat. This time he parried. Subtle, efficient movements that redirected Riku's force rather than opposing it directly. The knee strike, which should have connected solidly, slipped past Chuck's body as he turned slightly, his hand guiding Riku's leg harmlessly by. The younger fighter stumbled again, thrown off balance by his own momentum and Chuck's deft manipulation of it. "What you're witnessing," Aya explained to the broadcast audience, her voice hushed with reverence, "is the difference between fighting to dominate and fighting to control. Chuck Norris isn't trying to hurt his opponent. He's demonstrating mastery over space, timing, and energy." Riku recovered his balance and turned, his composure cracking visibly now. Sweat beaded on his forehead, not from exertion but from frustration. He had expected to humiliate a legend. Instead, he was being made to look like an amateur. "Hit me!" he demanded, slapping his own chest. "Come on! What are you afraid of?" Chuck's expression remained impassive. His eyes never left Riku's, watching not with anger or contempt, but with the focused attention of a teacher observing a student. The silence from the legend only fueled Riku's growing frustration. He launched forward again, this time abandoning some of his technical precision in favor of raw aggression. His strikes came harder, faster, with less control. Haymakers and wild kicks designed to overwhelm rather than outskill. For the first time, Chuck countered. It wasn't a spectacular move, no spinning kick or flying punch. Just a simple, perfectly timed straight right hand that connected with Riku's chest as he charged forward. The strike itself wasn't particularly powerful, but its precision was devastating. It landed exactly as Riku was shifting his weight, catching him at his most vulnerable point. The young fighter staggered backward, more surprised than hurt. A collective gasp rippled through the arena. After all the evasion and parrying, the single counter had the impact of a thunderclap. "Precision over power," Aya commented, her voice barely above a whisper. "The foundation of traditional martial arts philosophy." Riku's eyes widened, then narrowed. Being made to look foolish was one thing. Being controlled was another. He reset his stance, this time approaching more cautiously. He circled Chuck, looking for openings, feinting to draw out reactions. Chuck returned to his original posture, relaxed, hands at his sides, making no obvious fighting stance. The contrast between the two fighters couldn't have been more stark. Riku coiled with tension and aggression. Chuck, standing with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. "You think you're making me look bad?" Riku said through gritted teeth, just loud enough for Chuck to hear. "But you're just showing everyone you're afraid to really fight." Chuck's expression shifted slightly, not with anger, but with something like disappointment. It was the first emotional reaction he had shown since stepping onto the platform. That subtle change seemed to trigger something in Riku. He lunged forward with renewed determination, launching a complex combination of strikes, a testament to his technical skill when not clouded by emotion. Jab, cross, elbow, knee, each move flowing into the next with championship-level precision. Chuck parried the first strikes, redirected the elbow, and sidestepped the knee. Then, instead of evading the follow-up roundhouse kick, he blocked it directly, his forearm absorbing the impact with a solid thump that echoed through the arena. The two men froze in position for a heartbeat. Riku's leg extended in the kick, Chuck's arm holding firm against it. Their eyes met across the short distance between them. In that moment, something passed between them. An acknowledgement from Chuck, a flash of uncertainty from Riku. For the first time, the younger fighter seemed to realize he was not in a promotional event or a social media moment. He was in the presence of mastery. Then the moment broke. Riku pulled his leg back and reset his stance, his breath coming heavier now. Not from physical exertion, he was an elite athlete in peak condition, but from the mental strain of fighting an opponent who refused to follow his script. "Stop playing around," Riku said, his voice carrying a hint of genuine confusion now. "Fight for real." Chuck lowered his blocking arm slowly, returning to his neutral position. Still, he said nothing. His silence had become its own form of communication, a refusal to engage on Riku's terms, a demonstration that true combat needed no trash talk or theater. The Tokyo Dome had fallen almost completely silent. Even Kenta's live-stream commentary had quieted, his usual hype replaced by uncertain observations. The blades showing incredible patience here, testing the legend's defenses. In the commentary booth, Aya Nakamura leaned closer to her microphone. "What we're witnessing," she said softly, "is more than a physical contest. It's a philosophical statement about what martial arts truly represents." Riku circled again, visibly recalibrating his approach. The initial shock of Chuck's calm competence had worn off, replaced by a more focused determination. When he attacked again, his movements were more measured, still aggressive, but with greater control. A jab-cross combination probed Chuck's defenses. When those were parried, Riku followed with a low kick aimed at the knee, then immediately transitioned to an overhand right. The sequence was textbook perfection, exactly the kind of combination that had won Riku championships. The crowd tensed, expecting Chuck to evade as before. Instead, Chuck countered. The motion was so fast that many spectators missed it. A simple redirect of Riku's punch, followed by a straight strike to the solar plexus. Not delivered with crushing power, but with perfect precision and timing. Riku felt it. He stepped back, a flash of surprise crossing his face. Not pain, exactly, but the shocking realization that he had been hit so cleanly despite his perfect technique. Counter-striking at its finest, Aya observed, using the opponent's energy against them. Chuck resumed his neutral position, still making no aggressive moves, still offering no fighting stance. His eyes remained locked on Riku's, communicating something deeper than words could express. Something shifted in Riku's approach. The showmanship began to fall away, replaced by genuine fighting focus. His next attacks came without taunts or theatrical flourishes. Just clean, technical strikes delivered with professional skill. Chuck responded in kind. Though he still made no aggressive charges, his counters became more frequent. Small, precise strikes that landed at vulnerable points as Riku attacked. Each one was measured, controlled, designed to demonstrate rather than damage. To the educated observers in the crowd, what was unfolding was extraordinary. This wasn't a wild brawl or a flashy performance. It was a high-level conversation, conducted through movement, technique answering technique, strategy countering strategy. "Look at the footwork," the martial arts star in the VIP section murmured to his neighbor. "Chuck hasn't wasted a single step. Not one." Tetsuo nodded from his position at the edge of the platform, a small smile of appreciation crossing his weathered face. This was what he had hoped to see. Not a humiliation, but a demonstration. Riku launched another combination, this one featuring a feint followed by a spinning back fist. The move was beautiful in its execution, the kind that would make highlight reels and social media compilations. Chuck didn't evade completely this time. He slipped the worst of the impact, but allowed the edge of the back fist to graze his shoulder, a calculated risk that put him in perfect position for his counter. A simple palm strike to Riku's chest, delivered with just enough force to disrupt the younger fighter's balance. Riku stumbled back a step, his rhythm broken. Frustration flashed across his face again, but now it was the frustration of a craftsman whose best work was being methodically dissected, not the anger of a performer being denied his moment. "Why won't you attack?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "You're just countering." For the first time since stepping onto the platform, Chuck spoke. His voice was quiet but carried clearly in the hushed arena. "I don't need to attack you," he said simply. "You're attacking yourself." The words hung in the air, resonating through the Tokyo Dome. Their meaning rippled outward, not just about this fight, but about Riku's entire approach to martial arts. Riku blinked, processing the statement. Then his jaw set with renewed determination. He charged forward again, unleashing his most technical combination yet. A masterful sequence of strikes that showcased why he was champion. Each move flowed into the next with perfect biomechanical efficiency, creating a storm of potential impact points. Chuck met the charge not with evasion but with engagement. His blocks and parries came with mathematical precision, his counters landing at exactly the right moments to disrupt Riku's flow without causing harm. It was like watching a grandmaster chess player, always 3 moves ahead, controlling the board with minimal adjustments. The sequence ended with both men back at their starting positions, Riku breathing heavily, Chuck's breath still measured and controlled. For the first time, something like doubt crossed Riku's face. Not fear of being hurt, but the dawning recognition that he was being outclassed in ways he hadn't anticipated. His physical prowess, his technical skill, his championship pedigree, none of it seemed to matter against Chuck's economical mastery. Kenta's livestream commentary had shifted entirely. "The Blade is testing the legend with some of his most advanced combinations." Chuck Norris, showing why he's a Hall of Famer with that defense. The crowd's energy had transformed as well. The initial excitement over potential conflict had been replaced by something closer to reverence, the quiet appreciation of witnessing genuine artistry. In the commentary booth, Aya spoke with hushed intensity. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're seeing transcends sport or entertainment. This is the essence of martial arts philosophy made visible. Efficiency over flash, control over dominance, wisdom over strength." Riku reset his position, visibly processing what was happening. The cocky showman who had started this confrontation was receding, replaced by a fighter genuinely trying to solve the puzzle before him. When he attacked again, his movements were stripped of unnecessary flourish, just clean, direct strikes aimed with purpose. Chuck nodded slightly, a small acknowledgement of the shift in approach. His response was equally direct. Economical blocks, followed by instructive counters, each one demonstrating a principle rather than seeking to harm. To the uninitiated in the audience, it might have looked like a relatively even exchange. But to those who understood fighting at a deeper level, what was unfolding was extraordinary. A masterclass conducted not through words but through movement. Riku pressed forward again, attempting to use his superior youth and athleticism to overwhelm Chuck's technical precision. His strikes came faster, his footwork more aggressive as he tried to cut off the platform and force engagement. Chuck adapted seamlessly. Where before he had primarily evaded, now he stood his ground more frequently, meeting Riku's aggression with controlled counters. None were delivered with full power. That wasn't the point. Each was precisely calibrated to demonstrate a principle, to expose a gap, to teach through action. The spacing is incredible, Aya observed. Chuck Norris is controlling the distance like a conductor leads an orchestra, always maintaining exactly the position he wants regardless of his opponent's pressure. Sweat poured down Riku's face now, his earlier showmanship completely gone. He had entered the platform expecting to embarrass an old man. Instead, he found himself in a fight that challenged him on levels he hadn't anticipated. "Fight me for real," he finally burst out, frustration overwhelming his composure. "Stop, whatever this is." Chuck paused, studying the younger fighter with eyes that had seen thousands of opponents come and go. When he spoke, his voice remained calm. "This is real," he said simply. Something in those 3 words cut through Riku's defenses more effectively than any physical strike. He stood motionless for a moment, processing their meaning. Then anger flashed across his face. Not the performed anger of his earlier showmanship, but genuine frustration. With a shout that echoed through the arena, he charged forward, abandoning technique for raw aggression. It was exactly what Chuck had been waiting for. As Riku's wild haymaker sailed toward him, Chuck executed a textbook counterattack. He slipped the punch by mere inches, stepped into the pocket, and delivered a straight strike to Riku's sternum. The perfect demonstration of intercepting an opponent's charge. The blow wasn't delivered with crushing power. It didn't need to be. Its precision and timing were enough to stop Riku in his tracks, the air rushing from his lungs in a visible gasp. The Tokyo Dome fell completely silent. Even Kenta's live stream commentary ceased mid-sentence. Riku staggered back, eyes wide with shock. Not from pain, though the strike had certainly been felt, but from the sudden, visceral understanding of the gap between his fighting and Chuck's. It was the look of someone seeing clearly for the first time, recognizing how much they had yet to learn. Chuck returned to his neutral position, making no attempt to press his advantage. His expression remained calm, his breathing controlled. He waited, patient as ever, for Riku's next move. The young champion stood frozen, processing what had just happened. The audience watched in breathless anticipation, sensing that the true climax of this unexpected confrontation was approaching. On the edge of the platform, Tetsuo smiled knowingly. The lesson was being delivered exactly as it needed to be, not through humiliation or dominance, but through clear, undeniable demonstration. Riku's next choice would reveal whether he was capable of understanding what was being taught. The Tokyo Dome hummed with electric silence. Riku Tanaka stood in the center of the fighting platform, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The confident smirk that had defined his face earlier was gone, replaced by an expression caught between confusion and dawning realization. Across from him, Chuck Norris waited in that same calm, neutral stance, patient, unhurried, his eyes never leaving his opponent. "What just happened?" Kenta whispered into his live stream, his usual bombastic commentary subdued by genuine confusion. His camera zoomed in on Riku's face, capturing the subtle transformation taking place there. In the commentary booth, Aya Nakamura leaned forward, her voice hushed with reverence. What we just witnessed was the essence of counter, fighting using an opponent's aggression against them. Chuck Norris didn't generate the force, he simply redirected Riku's own energy back to its source. Riku rolled his shoulders and shook out his arms, visibly trying to reset both his body and mind. The choreographed showmanship that had characterized his earlier movements was gone. When he settled back into his fighting stance, it was with a new sobrietized look of an athlete who suddenly realizes he's in a real contest, not a performance. "Okay," he said, his voice carrying in the hushed arena. "Let's do this properly." Chuck acknowledged the shift with a slight nod, the first direct response he had offered to any of Riku's words. It was a small gesture, but its meaning was clear. Respect begets respect. This time when Riku advanced, his approach was measured. No wild charges, no theatrical flourishes. He closed the distance with disciplined footwork, cutting angles rather than rushing straight in. His first combination jab, cross, hook came with textbook precision, each strike flowing naturally into the next. Chuck parried the sequence with equal precision, neither retreating nor countering immediately. For several exchanges, the two men engaged in what looked to knowledgeable observers like a high-level technical conversation strike answered by block. Advance met with redirection, pressure countered with pressure. "Beautiful," Tetsuo murmured from the edge of the platform, his weathered face softening with appreciation. This was martial arts, as it was meant to be practiced not as spectacle, but as disciplined dialogue. After a particularly crisp exchange, Riku managed to land a glancing blow to Chuck's shoulder, nothing damaging, but clean contact nonetheless. A small murmur rippled through the crowd. Instead of celebrating or posturing, Riku simply reset and continued, his focus unbroken. Chuck's eyes registered subtle approval. When he countered the next sequence, his movements carried a different quality, not holding back exactly, but engaging more directly, meeting Riku's new seriousness with appropriate response. "The energy has completely transformed," Aya observed. "What began as confrontation has evolved into something closer to a high-level exhibition between two martial artists." Riku pressed forward with another combination, this one ending with a powerful roundhouse kick. Chuck blocked it directly, the impact producing a sharp sound that echoed through the arena. For a brief moment, the two men were frozen in that position. Riku's leg extended in the kick, Chuck's arm absorbing the force. Their eyes met across the short distance between them. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment of mutual recognition. Chuck lowered his block and stepped back slightly, creating space. Riku nodded almost imperceptibly as he returned to his stance. The next exchange came faster, with both men finding a rhythm. Riku's youth and athleticism allowed him to move with explosive speed, while Chuck's economy of movement and perfect timing repeatedly neutralized the advantages that should have come with that speed. Tetsuo watched with growing satisfaction. This was becoming what it should have been from the beginning, not a circus, but a demonstration of martial arts principles that transcended age and era. Then came the turning point. Riku, perhaps growing frustrated with his inability to definitively overcome Chuck's defense, attempted a spinning hook kick, a spectacular technique that had become one of his signature moves. It was beautifully executed, his body rotating with perfect balance as his heel arced toward Chuck's head with devastating potential. Instead of evading as he had with previous attacks, Chuck stepped into the technique. With timing honed by decades of practice, he intercepted Riku's rotation at its midpoint, before the kick could generate full power. His counter came not as a strike but as a subtle, off-balancing move, his forearm making contact with Riku's supporting leg, while his other hand redirected the kicking leg's momentum. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Riku's perfect technique collapsed into uncontrolled momentum. He stumbled awkwardly, nearly falling before catching himself at the last moment. It wasn't a knockdown, but it was something perhaps more significant. Complete dismantling of what should have been an elite fighter's best technique. The crowd gasped. Even those without fighting knowledge could recognize the mastery required to so thoroughly diffuse such an athletic move. Riku steadied himself, blinking rapidly as if coming out of a daze. Something had fundamentally shifted in the dynamic between the two men. This wasn't just about who was better. It was about the gap between different understandings of what fighting meant. Incredible, Aya breathed into her microphone. Chuck Norris just demonstrated why timing and positioning will always triumph over raw athleticism. That countermove wasn't about strength or speed, it was about understanding the biomechanics of his opponent's technique better than the opponent himself. Kenta, who had been live streaming every moment, lowered his phone slightly. "Did you see that?" he asked his viewers, genuine awe replacing his usual hype. "The legend, I don't even know how to explain what he just did." Riku stood at the center of the platform, visibly processing what had happened. His face cycled through emotions, confusion, frustration, and then something closer to genuine curiosity. When he reset his stance, it was with a new, qualityless, aggressive, more questioning. He approached again, this time with a probing jab that seemed designed not to land but to test Chuck's reactions. Chuck parried it easily, responding with a light counter that Riku evaded. Several exchanges followed in this vein. A more investigative approach from Riku met with instructive responses from Chuck. "What we're seeing now," Aya explained, "is something closer to a masterclass than a confrontation." Riku Tanaka appears to be adapting his approach, perhaps recognizing the opportunity to learn rather than simply to win. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Riku's movements became more thoughtful, less performative. He wasn't fighting for the crowd anymore. He was engaging with the challenge before him on its own terms. Chuck seemed to recognize and respond to this evolution. His counters became more demonstrative and not harder or more damaging, but clearer in the principles they illustrated. Each exchange now carried the quality of a lesson, with Chuck's movements functioning as physical koan's paradoxes that could only be understood through direct experience. Then came another pivotal moment. Riku launched a combination that ended with a powerful right cross technically perfect, delivered with championship-level skill. Instead of evading or parrying as he had before, Chuck chose to counter directly. The two strikes met in mid-air, Chuck's straight punch connecting with Riku's at the perfect angle to neutralize its force. The impact reverberated up Riku's arm. He stepped back, shaking out his hand, his eyes wide, with a new kind of surprise. It wasn't pain that registered on his face, but something closer to revelation, as if that simple counter had communicated something his years of training had never taught him. "That," Tetsuo said quietly to himself, "is the moment." In martial arts philosophy, there is a concept known as satori, a flash of sudden understanding that transcends intellectual knowledge. What crossed Riku's face in that moment looked remarkably like Satorian embodied realization that all his athleticism, all his technical skill, all his competitive achievements had somehow missed something fundamental about the art he practiced. Chuck lowered his hands slowly, his eyes never leaving Riku's. For the first time since stepping onto the platform, his expression softened slightly. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of what he saw happening in the younger fighter. Riku stood motionless, his fighting stance forgotten, as he processed whatever insight had just been transmitted through that exchange of strikes. When he finally moved again, it was with a different quality, more centered, more present, less concerned with appearance. "We are witnessing something extraordinary," Aya said, her professional demeanor momentarily giving way to genuine emotion. "This isn't about winning or losing anymore. This is about transmission, the passing of understanding that can only happen through direct experience." The Tokyo Dome had fallen so silent that the sound of both men's breathing was audible. The spectacle-hungry crowd that had chanted for confrontation earlier had been transformed into something closer to witnesses at a sacred ritual hushed, attentive, somehow aware that they were seeing something rare and significant. Riku reset his position and approached again, but now with a completely different energy. His movements were more economical, his focus more internal than external. He wasn't fighting for the audience or the cameras anymore. He was engaging with the experience itself. Chuck met this new approach with appropriate response. For the next several exchanges, the two men moved together in what looked less like combat and more like dialogia. Physical conversation about principles that transcended words. In the VIP section, the martial arts film star leaned toward his neighbor. "In 30 years of movies," he said quietly, "I've never captured what we're seeing right now." Kenta had stopped his running commentary entirely, simply holding his phone up to document what was unfolding. His usual hype had given way to reverent silence, the appropriate response to witnessing something that exceeded his understanding. Then came the moment that would be replayed on social media for months afterward. Riku launched another combination, this one neither aggressive nor hesitant, but perfectly balanced between intention and awareness. Chuck responded in kind, his counter neither dominant nor passive. For several breathtaking seconds, the two men exchanged techniques in perfect harmony like musicians who have found a common key after playing in different ones. The sequence ended with both fighters returning to neutral positions, a few feet separating them. Something had been communicated that transcended winning and losing, a recognition of shared pursuit despite different paths. Riku's chest rose and fell with exertion, sweat glistening on his face. But his expression had transformed completely from the arrogant young champion who had started this encounter. He looked at Chuck not with challenge or bravado, but with something approaching reverence. He began, his voice carrying clearly in the silent arena. "I think I understand now." Chuck held his gaze, neither confirming nor denying. The lesson wasn't complete yet. Then, in a gesture that sent ripples of surprise through the audience, Riku did something completely unexpected. He bowed, not the perfunctory nod he had given at the start of his exhibition match, but a formal, deep bow of genuine respect. The Tokyo Dome held its collective breath. Chuck acknowledged the bow with a slight inclination of his head, not accepting submission, but recognizing growth. When he straightened, his posture shifted subtly into something more formal, more structured. For the first time since stepping onto the platform, he assumed a traditional fighting stance. The message was clear. Now, with respect established, the real demonstration could begin. Riku's eyes widened slightly, recognizing both the honor and the challenge being presented. He settled into his own stance, his usual flashy position, but something more grounded, more centered. What followed was no longer a confrontation or even a lesson. It was a true exhibition. Two martial artists from different eras, finding common ground in the timeless principles that united their practices. Their movements flowed together with unexpected harmony, techniques answered by techniques, traditions honored through action rather than words. In the commentary booth, Aya found herself momentarily speechless before the significance of what she was witnessing. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the hushed quality of someone in the presence of something sacred. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "what we're seeing transcends sport or spectacle. This is the true spirit of martial arts, made visible at WoW practitioners from different worlds, finding the universal principles that connect all sincere pursuit of mastery." As the exhibition continued, something remarkable happened in the Tokyo Dome. The audience, which had come expecting entertainment, found itself transformed into something closer to students. The reverent silence that had fallen over the arena carried a quality of attention that went beyond mere spectatorship. They were witnessing not just physical techniques, but a philosophy embodied the living transmission of principles that had guided martial artists for centuries. Respect over ego, substance over appearance, mastery of self over domination of others. And as Chuck Norris and Riku Tanaka moved together in that unexpected harmony. The real victor of the night was already decided, not either man, but the art itself. The harmony between Chuck and Riku held for several exchanges, their movements flowing together with unexpected synchronicity. The Tokyo Dome remained hushed, the audience transfixed by this elevated display of martial arts. Then something shifted in Riku's demeanor. Perhaps it was the weight of expectation from a career built on dominance. Whatever the cause, a shadow passed across his fascia, flicker of ego reasserting itself. His next attack came harder, faster, edged with the need to prove something rather than understand. Chuck registered the change immediately. His response remained measured, neither escalating nor retreating, simply meeting the new energy with appropriate adjustment. "It seems Riku is struggling with conflicting impulses," Aya commented from the booth. The newfound appreciation for traditional martial arts versus the competitive identity that has defined his career. Tetsuo watched solemnly from the edge of the platform. He had seen this pattern countless times, the ego's resistance to being transcended, the pull of old habits against new insights. Riku launched a combination ending with a hook kick aimed at Chuck's head, technically perfect but carrying unmistakable competitive intent. Chuck evaded it easily, responding with a counter that once again exposed the gap in their understanding rather than their physical abilities. Frustration flashed across Riku's face, not theatrical frustration, but genuine. The frustration of a skilled athlete confronting limitations he hadn't previously recognized. "We're seeing the challenge every martial artist faces," Aya observed. "The technical skills are far easier to master than the psychological ones." Riku reset his position, visibly struggling with internal conflict. When he attacked again, his technique had regained some of its earlier flashiness movements, designed not just for effectiveness, but for appearance. Chuck's response remained consistent, economical, precise, instructive, rather than dominating. His counters continued to expose the fundamental truth. Mastery was not about imposing one's will, but about harmonizing with reality. A murmur rippled through the crowd as the pattern became apparent even to untrained eyes. This wasn't about age or era, it was about depth versus surface, principles versus techniques. Riku sensed it too. The awareness that he was somehow falling short despite his physical prime fueled a growing urgency in his movements. His combinations came faster, harder, with an edge of desperation beneath their technical excellence. Then came the catalyst. Riku launched a spinning back kick, his signature move, the technique that had featured in countless highlight reels. It was athletically spectacular, technically flawless in its execution. Chuck didn't evade. Instead, he stepped directly into the technique's path, not to block or counter, but to control. With timing honed by decades of practice, his hands made contact with Riku's leg at precisely the point where the kick's rotation was most vulnerable. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Chuck redirected the kick's momentum with subtle precision, neither opposing its force directly nor allowing it to complete its intended arc. The result was a complete disruption of Riku's balancino through strength or aggression, but through perfect understanding of biomechanics and timing. Riku, caught in mid-technique with his weight committed to the movement, found himself suddenly airborne, his body rotating not by his own intention but as a result of Chuck's manipulation of his momentum. For a suspended moment, he hung in space, all control lost. Then gravity took over. The impact when he hit the mat echoed through the Tokyo Dome because it was particularly violent, but because of the absolute silence that had fallen over the arena. Riku landed flat on his back, the air driven from his lungs in an audible gasp. The crowd's collective intake of breath was followed by a moment of stunned silence. What they had witnessed wasn't a brutal knockout or an aggressive takedown. It was something more profound, the perfect demonstration of how fundamental principles could overcome even the most athletic technique when applied with mastery. Chuck stood completely still, making no move to press his advantage, showing no celebration or dominance. His expression remained calm, his posture relaxed, yet attentive. Kenta lowered his phone, his live stream forgotten in the shock of what he had just witnessed. Did you all see that?" he whispered to his viewers, genuine awe replacing his usual hyperbole. "Ladies and gentlemen," Aya said, her voice hushed with reverence, "what we just witnessed transcends sport. That was the physical embodiment of martial arts philosophy demonstration, that true mastery is not about imposing force, but about understanding and redirecting energy." Tetsuo nodded slowly, satisfaction evident in his weathered face. The lesson had been delivered exactly as needed, not through humiliation or dominance, but through clear, undeniable demonstration. For several heartbeats, Riku remained on his back, processing what had happened. When he finally moved, it was with the deliberate care of someone awakening from a profound dream. He sat up slowly, then rose to his feet, not with the immediate bounce back of an athlete eager to continue, but with the measured movements of someone fundamentally reconsidering their understanding. He stood facing Chuck, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths. The arrogant young champion who had begun this encounter was gone, replaced by a fighter confronting limitations he had never before recognized. When he met Chuck's gaze, it was with clear eyes, the look of someone seeing truly for perhaps the first time. No words were exchanged. None were needed. What had been communicated went beyond language, beyond even the physical techniques that had been their medium. Chuck's expression softened slightly. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of what he saw in the younger fighter's eyes. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then, in a gesture that would be replayed millions of times on social media, Riku placed his open right hand over his closed left fist, the traditional salute of respect in many martial arts traditions, and bowed deeply. The Tokyo Dome held its collective breath. Chuck returned the gesture with equal formality, right hand over left fist, a measured bow that acknowledged not submission but growth. Without further exchange, Chuck turned and walked calmly toward the edge of the platform. His movement carried no triumph, no dominance, just the measured pace of someone who had accomplished what he came to do. As he reached the steps, a sound began to build throughout the Tokyo Dome. It started as a whisper, then grew steadily. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" The chant spread like fire, gaining strength until it filled the massive arena. Unlike the earlier chants that had carried bloodthirsty anticipation, this one resonated with reverence, the sound of thousands, recognizing that they had witnessed something rare and significant. Chuck paused at the top of the steps, turning slightly to acknowledge the crowd with a small nod. Then he descended, moving with the same unhurried dignity that had characterized his entire presence. Behind him, Riku stood alone in the center of the platform. The young champion who had entered with music, lights, and entourage now seemed distilled to something more essential. The performative layers had been stripped away, leaving just the martial artist beneath. As Chuck reached the floor level, Tetsuo stepped forward to meet him. The two old friends exchanged a look that contained voluminous satisfaction from Tetsuo, quiet acknowledgement from Chuck. "What we've witnessed tonight wasn't scheduled on any program," Aya said, emotion evident beneath her measured tone. "But I believe everyone present understands that we've been privileged to see something rare, a demonstration of what martial arts truly represents at its highest level." Dawn broke over Tokyo, in soft gold, and rose. In a small traditional garden behind the exhibition center, Chuck Norris sat in meditation on a stone bench. At 85, his face carried the lines of every battle fought, every lesson, learned, living map of a remarkable journey. Footsteps approached on the gravel path. Chuck opened his eyes to see Tetsuo Mori standing nearby. "I thought I might find you here," Tetsuo said. "You always did prefer quiet mornings for reflection." Chuck gestured to the space beside him. His old friend joined him, both men sitting in comfortable silence, watching the light strengthen across the garden. "The boy has talent," Chuck said finally. "Real talent, buried under all that noise." Tetsuo nodded. "Yes, but talent without guidance becomes merely spectacle. Many of this generation learned techniques without understanding the philosophy behind them. Or when not to fight," Chuck added. Tetsuo produced a phone. "Have you seen the response?" he asked, offering the device. Chuck glanced at it briefly. The footage had gone viral, clips of the confrontation viewed millions of times in just hours. But what might have been framed as humiliation had taken on a different quality. Comments spoke of respect, of principles, of the demonstration of martial arts values that transcended physical techniques. Most striking were videos posted by martial arts schools around the world, dojos and academies, sharing the footage with comments about the importance of humility and the true meaning of mastery. "They saw," Chuck said quietly, "not just the techniques, but the meaning behind them." Across the exhibition center, in a smaller practice hall, Riku Tanaka moved through basic kata with meticulous attention. Gone were the flashy modifications he had always added. He executed each movement with methodical precision, focusing on fundamentals as if experiencing them for the first time. The door opened. Aya Nakamura entered, pausing to observe. "Your form has improved overnight," she observed. "I've been practicing since dawn. Basic kata? The champion who once called traditional forms museum pieces?" A wry smile crossed Riku's face. "I'm reconsidering many of my previous statements. Your fans are worried. No posts since last night. Your manager says you've canceled today's media appearances. I have nothing to say right now. What happened out there last night? Beyond the obvious, I mean." Riku considered the question with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. "I've spent my career perfecting techniques," he said slowly. "I thought that was what martial arts was about, being the fastest, the strongest, the most dominant." He shook his head. "But last night, he didn't beat me with speed or strength. He beat me with understanding, presence, something I've been missing all along. The philosophy behind the techniques," Aya suggested quietly. "Yes, exactly." Riku's expression revealed the struggle of someone confronting fundamental assumptions about their life's work. "I know how to fight. I know how to win. But last night showed me I don't really understand what I'm fighting for or why." Late afternoon, sunlight slanted through high windows in the Tokyo Dome's main concourse. Chuck Norris stood near a quieter side exit, having just completed a brief, unscheduled appearance that had brought the audience to their feet in spontaneous ovation. Tetsuo approached with Aya. "There is one last person asking to speak with you." Moments later, Riku Tanaka appeared. The young champion looked markedly different, simple training clothes, his expression lacking any trace of its former arrogance. When he saw Chuck, he stopped and bowed deeply, a formal gesture of profound respect. "Mr. Norris," he said as he straightened, "thank you for agreeing to see me." Chuck acknowledged the bow with a measured nod. "I came to apologize for my disrespect," Riku said, meeting Chuck's gaze directly. "And to thank you for the lesson you taught me." "And what lesson was that?" Chuck asked. Riku considered carefully before answering. "That I've been practicing techniques without understanding their purpose. That I've confused attention with respect. That true mastery isn't about dominating others but about controlling myself." Chuck studied the younger man, noting the changes evident not just in his words but in his presence. "The recognition that there is more to learn is the beginning of true mastery," he said. "Many fighters never reach that understanding." "I would have continued in ignorance if not for last night," Riku admitted. "You could have humiliated me. Instead, you chose to teach me. I didn't teach you anything you weren't ready to learn. The humility was always within you, just needed to be awakened." Riku hesitated, then asked, "Would you recommend someone who could guide me? A teacher who understands the deeper aspects of the art?" Chuck's gaze shifted to Tetsuo. "You already have such a teacher here in Tokyo. Someone who understands that martial arts is not just what you do, but how you live." Tetsuo straightened slightly, surprise evident in his weathered face. "If he is willing," Chuck continued, "you would find no better guide." Riku turned to Tetsuo, recognition dawning. "The referee. You're Tetsuo Mori, the 5-time All-Japan champion from the 1970s. Tetsuo inclined his head modestly. "Among other things, yes. If you are sincere in your desire to learn," Tetsuo said, "I would consider it an honor to offer guidance." As Chuck prepared to leave, Riku bowed again, deeper than before. "Thank you," he said simply. "For everything." Chuck paused, looking back at the younger fighter. "Remember," he said, "respect isn't taken. It's earned. Not through domination or spectacle, but through consistent demonstration of values that transcend the fighting arena." 1 week later, a video appeared on Riku's social media, the first content he had posted since that night. No flashy editing, no dramatic music. Just the young champion demonstrating basic kata with meticulous attention to form and principle. The caption was simple: "Day 1 on a longer journey than I realized. Respect the art." In Tokyo, in a traditional dojo far from spotlights and cameras, Riku moved through basic forms under Tetsuo's watchful eye. Each technique executed with renewed purposino to impress or dominate, but to understand. The journey that had begun with disrespect had transformed into something unexpected. A rediscovery of martial arts, not as performance or competition, but as a lifelong path toward mastery of oneself. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.